Hey, what's going on, everybody? It is your boy BQ. Welcome back to the Negative BQ YouTube channel. We are getting ready to wrap up 2024, heading into 2025. And I would be doing myself a disservice if I didn't talk about the improved marketing of TNA in 2024. I just haven't really taken the time to sit down and talk about this yet, but it's obviously something I have to do because for those who have followed me from day one, and it's been like 9 years, 10 years, the number one thing, I don't talk about it as much as I used to because I used to just lose my mind over it. But the number one thing that I had I'd spoken on for all my podcasts and all my episodes, and just I just could not get it out of my head and get the words out of my mouth was marketing. TNA's marketing. When I first started podcasting, I looked at the company of like, man, it's a good product. They just have to make some improvements in their the way they promote, the way they market, and things can start turning around. And as the months passed, the years passed, and I saw such little improvement in this area, I became kind of jaded towards this company at times. Like in the early days, I was super positive covering this because I saw the potential. And then as time passed, I felt like they were kind of squandering that potential. I just never saw an effort to get better, an effort to get bigger. They would talk about it. They would talk about it all the time, but there was just no. There was not a perceived effort, and it was like very, very. Every time there was improvement, it was just so minuscule and minute, and it was just not. Nothing was really like moving the needle. So over times, I got very, very frustrated with this. And it really came to a head around the time of the pandemic. Um, I, there's three times that I think in TNA's history were the complete shits. It was the Global Force Wrestling era, and not so much the GFW, but like kind of before GFW, during GFW, and right after GFW. Like there was this ugly period where the show was awful. There's the dark days of Hogan and Bischoff and all that. I wouldn't say they were putting on like bad television necessarily, but it was just kind of the downfall was uh, you know beginning at the time. It was kind of the start of the downfall. The start of there were some bad angles, bad stories. There were some bad episodes. They were just bringing in guys for paychecks. So those are kind of like the darker days. Um, and there was the pandemic era for me. And around that time, I was really, really close at quitting this podcast thing. You don't know how many times during 2020, 2021, and 2022 that I just wanted to stop. The show was a chore for me. Covering the company was a chore for me. I was depressed watching it. I no kidding was. And I know that we talk about the pandemic times, and we always talk about, well, we got to give people a pass and companies a pass and TV shows a pass. Like we're supposed to give everyone a pass, right? But I just thought the product they put out during that time was not good. I was depressed watching it. I mean, it was, and when I say it's not good, you got to remember, I'm comparing it to AEW, who put on a great pandemic. During the pandemic, their show was very good. WWE obviously went above and beyond. No one's going to get to that level, but they put a lot of effort in. Ring of Honor, I thought, was a better product because the commentary was 50 times better than what Impact had with Josh Matthews, and I think it was Madison Rain at the time. And then we had a little bit of Matt Stryker and D'Lo. Like, so what they were doing was a lot better because the commentary was so laser focused on the action that you just didn't really pay attention to what was going on around it. So I'm comparing to other companies, and I'm like, they're putting a lot of effort forth, and then TNA was sitting here. we put on the best pandemic wrestling show. That was the wrestler said it, Scott said it, and I'm like, if you guys think this is the best show, then I don't need to be here anymore. Because you're anytime someone says something like that, to me as a fan, they're telling me we're so good, we don't need to get better. And we're the best, so we're already setting the standard. Like, it was complete bullshit to me. And there was just so many things the company said and did that I was just like, this they don't care. They're very content being mediocre. And I started getting really, really angry at what they were doing. I wasn't enjoying the shows. I, you know, and again, you're gonna tell me, well, there was no one in the crowd. No one had people in the crowd. Like when I was watching the WNBA, the NBA, MLB, I wasn't depressed watching the shows. There was no one in the crowds. I wasn't fucking depressed because they made a fucking effort to they rolled with the punches and they made an effort to make the program entertaining. And TNA literally put wrestlers in an empty arena, and that's what they gave us. You know what I mean? Like there was just for months on end before they kind of piped in crowd noise. It was just like the minimum effort, and it angered me so much. And you kind of go now to 2024. Like the show has not been a chore for me to watch. I enjoy watching the show more often than not. The TNA Plus shows are a chore for me because they're not there's no like no storylines. The majority of the matches are put together out of excuses. So you're just watching like good wrestling for 3 hours. And I already kind of tap out at 2 hours, but an episode where you kind of there's some storylines throughout the show and they're building things and like when it's Bound for Glory, Slammiversary, things like that. Well, they're building for months, so I can enjoy those shows even though they're longer. For me, the TNA Plus shows are just like, hey, let's just give you good matches. Like that's boring to me. So that's a bit of a chore. But the actual Impact show has not been a chore for me in 2024. But to go back to kind of what I was saying, I've been begging them to improve their marketing. And I don't want to act like anybody's stupid when I say this, okay? I'm just trying to clarify. Promotion and marketing are not the same. And the way that I always put it is promotion is like, hey, we're promoting this show. This is what we want you to watch. This is what we want you to order. Marketing is this is how we're going to get you to care enough to order or to watch the show. So there is a difference between the two. So a lot of times when I say marketing, people are like, well, they're retweeting stuff like that. That is not what I'm talking about. To give you to give you a good example, the best wrestling show in my period, I mean, in my period, in my opinion, that was ever marketed was All In. That's kind of before AEW became a thing. That's what AEW was built off, right? But the All In show to me was the best marketed wrestling show that I can really remember. I thought the first Jericho Cruise was marketed very well as also, not so much since then, but All In. And it was so simple. It wasn't just like, hey, we're booking this big arena and we're going to put on a wrestling show. Like you do that, you're not going to fill it. But the real simple concept they did was come up with the graphic and say XYZ wrestler is all in. And it had people salivating on social media and waiting like who's next? Who's all in? Who is buying into this? You know what I mean? And they were able to sell this bitch out within minutes without even announcing the freaking matches. They're just kind of letting you know who's going to be there. It was a very simple social media campaign, but it got people so excited and they were talking and they were buzzing. And that's what marketing does. It gets people talking. Like you're not going to just get excited because they're saying, "Hey, Bound for Glory is coming to Chicago in 2020." When they had Bound for Glory, not this past one, but the year before. Let me pause on that real quick. Let me talk about the ticket sales real quick for Slammiversary. The Slammiversary this year, what did they do in a few days? Like 1,500 tickets, right? Now I'm going to go backwards here. Bound for Glory, the year before. I'm not talking about this year, but last year. They announced Bound for Glory 10 months in advance where it was going to be in Chicago. You know what the marketing campaign was for it? To announce Trinity was a part of it. That was it. Or that not even that she was a part of that, that she was a part of the company. That was it. And then throughout the rest of the show, just standard whatever to get up to that point. They didn't fucking sell that show out until like a week or two before the freaking show. And Trinity was actually the one that really had promoting it, and she's always like, "Oh, we're sold out for Bound for Glory." I'm like, "Yeah, but it just happened." You know what I mean? Like it took you guys a year to get to that point. Now they're doing these shows like we kicked off the top of the year with Hard to Kill and Rebellion, and I mean the tickets are flying, right? Um, I think for the tapings they were really really slow, but they were flying, and then all of a sudden they're booking these TNA plus shows and these pay per views, and the tickets are like really selling, and we're seeing the biggest crowds we have seen in a really long time. I don't want to say that we've ever seen, but the biggest crowds we've seen in a very long time, and they're on to something right now. But this is what I've been asking for the longest time, you know? It's why I get so mad when we get on Twitter. Like I don't follow TNA's Twitter, okay? Because it just started pissing me the fuck off. Because you got this, Garrett Kidney motherfucker that's like, "Oh, I'm gonna wait for Bobby Lashley to come on AEW, and then I'm gonna make a video to remind you that he was in AEW, and I'm gonna put all this effort for what? To pop the TNA fans." Because you look at the comments of those every time that happens. There's lots of engagement. Like engagement is part of social media. So don't get me wrong. It's not like doing that is a complete waste of your time because you do have to build engagement. But look in the comments, it's all the marks. You know what I'm saying? This admin doesn't miss. TNA doesn't miss. And then you got a couple negative people in there that be like, "Oh yeah, desperate much for attention? Yeah, okay, we get it, guys. Like he used to wrestle there." But that stuff would piss me off so much because you got to put on some real effort to sit there and put these clips together and to wait for the debut to come and like for what? Like to pop the TNA marks, you know what I mean? And that was like the social media campaign was just pop the TNA marks and then post clips from the show. There was like absolutely nothing done to generate interest in the current product. Now I don't follow the Twitter, so I can't, like I just said, I'm not like super engaged in it, but I don't see as much of that anymore because what they're doing on the show is actually good and it's actually buzzworthy and it's actually worth talking about. It's stuff that the fans get excited about. So they haven't had to like resort to that, but it's always from the beginning angered me like this company is in love with their fucking library. Like Motor City Machine Guns and show up on WWE and it's like, "Hey, we had the Motor City Machine Guns here. Well, why didn't you fucking make them superstars when you had them if you fucking love them so much?" I know they put titles on them at the end. I think it was because they were leaving and Scott D'Amore promised them title runs and they had to put titles on them, but I just never felt like the company never had a perception of we really care about who we have. We only care about who we used to have. That was just like the perception, and that does nothing to build um, new followers and new fans. It does nothing. You have to make the people, the men and women on your roster now matter and seem important. So from the top of the year till now, I say it all the time. There was one misstep, and that was the Orlando tapings. I've explained to you guys. They had to run with Scott D'Amore's creative, so that's why I still felt like Impact Wrestling after they rebranded to TNA, and then they got out of that, and then it's been like off to the races ever since that. And the show's been good for the most part. They have their bad parts, but I think they're cutting a lot of that fat going into 2025 because they still had a lot of the guys under contract that Scott brought on, the people that Scott promised title runs, people that Scott overpaid. They were still on the roster, and now they're like kind of trimming that fat. Um, but there's no excuses in 2025 because for 2024 you still had an excuse where it's like, well, we're still coming off the decisions of Scott Demore. Okay, because I've had people message me, okay, Scott's gone. Why is that still an excuse? Well, Scott hired all these dudes. Scott put all these things in place. The way the show looked and sounded was because of him. Um, and just all these other things. You can't just replace and fix all those things just because Scott's gone. It takes time, but it's an excuse that you cannot have in 2025 anymore. You've had pretty much an entire year without him to get it together, and now it's like put up or shut up. You cannot blame him anymore. The fans can't blame him. I can't blame him. Nothing. But some of these guys that we're gonna see gone, who are leaving, the Kashidas, Trent Sevens, and all that, like guys that Scott brought in, paid a lot of money, did absolutely nothing to draw any kind of excitement for the product. There was excitement when they signed because the one thing that'll get a TNA fans dick hard is knowing that someone signed with the company. I understand the business model of bringing in these handshakes and per appearance and all that shit. Like I get that, but TNA fans don't like that. They like when someone commits to the company. So it doesn't even matter who the hell it is. It can be someone a complete irrelevancy, but because they sign a long-term deal, they're, erections everywhere. So to kick off the year, and it was part of the improved marketing, but they put out the graphics saying, "Yo, so and so signed to TNA." They were year contracts. They might as well have been handshake deals, but they see the graphic, so and so signed. That started becoming their so and so is all in. And they dropped several of those, at the top of the year. And that got people really, really excited and really buzzed for Hard to Kill and things to come after that. But TNA fans like someone who makes a commitment. The problem when you keep trying to grab people from WWE, those people don't want to commit to TNA. And TNA fans like the idea of someone from WWE coming over a lot more than they actually like the person from WWE being in the company. Because you get them come over, they come over and then they win the titles, they win all the matches, Trinity, fucking Nick Nemeth. Like it's really like throughout the years, it has been the Good Brothers. You know what I mean? Throughout the years, it's been they come over and then they just dominate the show. It is it's been something since we talk about Hogan and Bischoff. Like they still do that stuff in one way or another. So I hope that this year they are able to lock down deals with people who want to be there, and I think that they will because Scott used to operate off handshake deals, and the reason he does that is because he can make these verbal promises to them, and there's no paperwork. He can make verbal promises regarding money versus, regarding title runs, creative control, how much you're going to be on TV, but there's no paper trail to where he's held accountable or where the people in Anthem know what's going on. You know, I do think that in this year here they're going to start. This is just my speculation. I think they're going to go into 2025 and say, "Hey, we want people who want to be here and or who will just willing to be here long term." Or the problem is, and I think that's how they locked the Hardys down. The Hardys signed a contract that's probably through 2025. I mean, I doubt it's any longer than that. But that's a great sign that they got those guys to sign. If those guys can sign, other people can as well. The problem is the only people who are going to sign deals with TNA, not the only people, but for the most part, are people who have already got in their head that WWE is not an option, or that I would say AEW as well, but I think the writing's on the wall a little bit for wrestlers now, saying, okay, we go there. They see Ricochet and all these dudes go and go, some of the knockouts too, and go into complete irrelevancy after the first month or two of buzz. So that is going to give TNA an opportunity to really sign people and to be more of an option. But hopefully they can sign more people because again, you put that graphic out, so and so sign with TNA. There's nothing that's going to get retweeted more than that and more engagement than that. But from my conversations with people at TNA, they There just seems to be an optimism that didn't exist in the past. There seems to be an excitement that didn't exist in the past, and a real desire to grow because that just didn't exist under Scott Demore. It didn't. Even when I was doing the Cool Factor podcast with TW, he was always saying this wasn't coming from me, just me. He was always saying they are so content with where they're at and the show that they put on. They're content with how it looks. They're you know they're just content from top to bottom. There's no evidence that they are trying to grow this thing. We see the evidence now. There's always this new Canada deal, huge deal. Um, Trying to get in different markets. Even Joe Hendry and Matt Hardy and these guys talking about, oh, we're trying to get a better US deal. I don't think that's going to happen. I'm going to make that real clear. I get that question so much. Do you think, a huge TV deal's next? I really fucking don't. AEW can't even get their Shockwave show a deal. They can't get Ring of Honor a deal, and they have so much more money behind it, and um, so much more production value and really bigger names, and they can't. I just don't see what you guys want to happen. If it does happen, like, fucking amazing. I'll be one of the first people to be excited about it. I just don't think it's going to happen. I don't see it happening. I can see, they might be trying really, really hard. I think you just have to be prepared that we're dealing with Access TV for the long haul. But if we're able to get a few live episodes throughout the year, that's been a big marketing tactic too, because they announced that at Bound for Glory, right? And people are still talking about it. When something is marketed well, there is online chatter that lasts beyond a day. You can talk about anything for a day, but if you're still 2, 3, 4 weeks, a month later, 2 months later, still talking about it, still talking about the live episode, that's good. That means it was marketed very well, and your approach to it was correct. But the show finally looks good on TV visually. Sometimes it can get a little dark on us, but for the most part, it looks so much better. There's no color corrections. There's white balancing the cameras finally. There's no fucking filters. There's no over contrast. Um, I mean, it- I explained to you guys that part of the relationship with NXT was how to produce television. It's so much beyond the creative. I've tried to explain that to you guys many times. It wasn't just about what we saw on screen. There was a relationship off screen too that was, how do we make this show feel better? Because if you look at NXT and that show sucks dick, but it looks incredible. The vibe is great. And TNA's starting to get that vibe a little bit, you know. Um Access TV, they're bringing all these guys from Access who know how to produce TV, and it's not, it's showing. It's showing on screen. The graphics are better. There's so many things that are better. Like, I just can't explain to you guys anymore how depressed I was watching this show. It had Scott Demore all over. It was We Own the Night every fucking 5 minutes. The color red just dominated the whole show. Even when they brought fans on, they the camera was always on the entrance ramp, and it was like 12, 13 people, and they looked miserable. And it was just, for me, like a really depressing show to watch. And there's not an episode in 2024 that I felt was a chore to turn on. I don't watch it as it airs because it's not that much of a priority to me. It's not a priority watch to me. Obviously, I cover the company, I enjoy the company, I'm gonna watch the show, but it is not a hey, TNA's coming on, let me drop what I'm doing. Sorry to my wife and my kids, but I have to watch this. Like, that doesn't exist for me with this show. I'll watch the live episode as it airs, though. That I will do because I'm gonna attempt to review it right afterwards. Um, but guys, there's been so many improvements in 2024. I'm always gonna be a critic. Guys like me and Mike Gilbert, we're always gonna be critics, and I know people don't like that about us. Chop it up to us being in the military for our entire adult lives. chop it up to that because we just come from an environment where like excellence is the only option, not like half-assing stuff and being mediocre and being content. Like that's just not the environment we're in. So that's what angers us so much. That's what has made us so critical over the years, and you know, why we don't just point out the good, why we point out so much of the bad because we can't relate to that way of thinking because it's not the environment we came from. They taught me from day one, like when you're in basic training, small details, small details. You can't do the small things. No one's going to believe that you can handle the big things. Like that was what was drilled in my head for a very long time. So that's why when I get on here, everyone's like, you're nitpicking and shit. And it's just like, yeah, I am. But if you can't do those little things, like you guys are talking about, oh, they're going to get a TV deal, a US TV deal, and they're going to be on True TV and they're going to, why would those companies bring on this company? I mean, why would those television stations bring on this small wrestling company who can't even white balance a camera? Like, does that make any sense to you? So that's why the small details matter. Like, you have to dress for the job that you want, and they weren't doing that. They were dressing for the job that they had. And we're finally seeing effort. I've been saying this throughout the show here. We're finally seeing an effort, not just effort behind the scenes that we assume happens. Like we see it. We see the actual effort. We see, you know, for them, they announce these big venues coming up, right? You're not filling those without great marketing. You can say, "Hey, we're going to try to run a 8,000 person arena or whatever the hell it is." If you don't have a marketing plan behind it, no one is going to buy those tickets. You're just going to have the same 1,000, 1,500 people, maybe two, whatever that you have been getting. I'm going to assume they have a plan in place. Even this social media campaign where they put out the graphic, and say, hey, told the fans to put themselves in the graphic that was promoting. And I made a bunch of really, really silly ones. If you check my Twitter, um, I was putting a lot of people not involved in the company anymore. But even though the one shitty thing is that instead of just giving people a blank graphic, they took one where they used an eraser tool to erase whoever they had there. So you just saw like a big blur in the in the middle of the screen. I thought that was ghetto as shit, but the idea was very good. It got people talking and fans excited for a big arena, but they know that they got to fill that big arena. You know what I mean? So the fans are feeling like they got to do their part. Uh, to be some of the spectators at these shows. So people are really going out of their way, and it helps being in the bigger markets of New York and LA where people want to go and they want to visit. That was very helpful for Hard to Kill and Rebellion. Here in Vegas, like people like to visit here. So um, they're just been a lot smarter about their venues. They've kind of stopped running some of the ones that were they were running certain cities where they were getting 150 people in the crowd, and that was under Scott, and we haven't seen that this year. That Orlando taping was literally the only one that it just like it stood out like a sore thumb on this year of great television, great signings, and again, I think we're gonna trim the fat. The literally with Trent Seven, Kushida, uh, Jonathan Gresham, who I think most of us like, but just never really found his footing on the show. Um, I'm trying to think of some of the other people that are, we're getting rid of Rhino, PCO, and I understand these wrestlers, people do like, but the one thing I point about PCO all the time, I constantly pointed out, is that no one that works a program with him is better afterwards. They're always worse. Um, and you sat here and you built this guy who was also promised a world title run. You built this guy, he doesn't lose, and now he's on his way out, and he's got two fucking belts. And who has been better, and who's gonna be better? Like we just know at this point he's gonna drop the belts. It's not like someone's gonna take him off him, because they got pushed. They're just gonna be like, hey, he's leaving, so we got to get the belts off him. And this happens way too much in TNA. Ever since I've been covering this company, everyone, eh, it feels like half the champions are they just took they only lose because they're leaving the company and you have to take the belts off them. And there's like absolutely no build up to it, So, but they have a big challenge ahead because Speedball Mike Bailey was someone they really, really relied on the last couple of years. He over delivered. He under delivered from a standpoint of charisma, but as far as in ring and all that, he over delivered. And now they got to find someone that's going to step into those shoes. They did a very poor job of this was the man, I've said it so many times. This was like the shallowest knockouts division they've had in a really long time. They did a very poor job preparing for the departure of some of their top names. Now it seems like at least trying to push Masha. They're preparing for Jordan Grace's departure. Um, and I think that in 2025, I think we're seeing much improved knockouts division. We'll obviously have Kylan King back from injury, which is going to be very helpful. But the thing with the ladies is there is a plethora of talent in the indies. That's why like the NWA has such a good women's roster because there's no shortage of women of female talent. It doesn't matter AEW and signing all these chicks up. Like there's still lots of chicks out there. There's not a lot of male talent out there that you can really invest in, but the female talent, I mean, there's all sorts of it out there. So the opportunity to really build up the knockouts division in 2025, I think that has to be a priority next year of saying, hey, let's get back to this is the best women's division in wrestling because it's not. It's a good division. It doesn't stink, but I think NWA's women's division is better. Just because I think the world of Kylie Page and Kenzie Page. Um, I've brought up they got Taylor Rising, who TNA uses as a jobber. Right now they got Hollywood Haley J on there. I don't know if she's gonna be there long term, but they have girls who are really, really good. Um, Even though the male roster kind of stinks, just because there's so much out there. But they have a really good division. NXT obviously division is the next level. Um, WWE, main roster they have the best women wrestlers in the world, like as far as the top few. I wouldn't say it's a very deep division on television. And then I've always thought AEW's women's division was a lot better than it gets credit for. They have a lot of talent as well. Like TNA really has to catch up in that division in 2025, and I think they have a chance to do that. Obviously, the tag team division is a talking point every year of how is this going to get better, and it, it it's hard. Like they honestly just need to take some chances. As I said, there's not a whole lot of amazing male talent on the indie scene, but I mean, if you can get another Sinner and Saint, you get another Sinner and Saint. If you get two or three teams like that, um, there are teams out there. You're just going to have to really put an effort into building them. That is the challenge because that is not always something they do. It's always who can we get from somewhere else, and that mentality needs a change. And I was told that they, how can I word this? I had made a comment to someone that TNA fans do not like WWE wrestlers coming in and taking the titles. Like I said earlier in the show, fans like the idea of a TNA guy coming over more than they actually like them being there. And it was pointed out to me like, we didn't put the title on Nick Nemeth right away. We very well could have. Scott would have. Scott wouldn't have had him lose at Slammiversary. Are you kidding me? So they did make an effort there to where they didn't put the title on him right away. But that is going to be one area as I wrap this up that I think is going to be a huge challenge going into the year, which I think is going to be a little better, now that you don't have going a full year without Scott. But I mentioned many times, made too many promises to people they're going to be champions. And then that's why all these titles, Alex Shelley, um, Chris Sabin, Nick Nemeth, when everyone thought Joe Hendry would win the title or that Moose would retain at Slammiversary, like Nick Nemeth gets the title out of nowhere. That's why you see these guys just, um, PCO getting the digital media championship. Like they're promised these title runs, and then even though it makes like no sense for the show, they win. Like PCO has been the worst champion in the last several years with this digital media title. When you had actually AJ Francis actually doing things and getting social media influencers involved, and getting people on the show, and getting the brand out there. But it was like, oh, PCO has to be a champion before his contract is up. So here you go. I, I don't think they're going to run into that issue in 2025, and they're going to be able to put titles on guys in a more organic fashion rather than, you know, that's Scott's tactic of this is how we're going to convince you to sign. I just hope that I hope we're getting away from that. But I do think that the challenge is going to be they do got to get the title on Mike Santana. I think they do got to get it on Frankie Kazarian. I think these are things that they were promised when they came aboard, and they're going to have to figure out how to do that, but also have a Joe Hendry title reign that isn't a joke, you know? So we will see, but that is going to do it for me. Very excited about 2025. Just the fact that they're announcing these venues well in advance instead of at the last minute, and they're actually making attempts to get people excited and talking, and they want to put butts in the seats, and they care. It's exciting. The show does not feel like a chore, and that makes me very, very happy. I'm not sitting here like, oh my God, I want to quit doing this more than anything. I haven't felt like that this entire year after going about 3 years of wanting nothing more than to stop watching the show. That is going to do it for me, folks. I'm your boy, BQ. I'm out. Peace.